All right, so today we're going to be talking about Kathmandu Durbar Square.
Yeah.
Kathmandu Durbar Square. And to help us with this, we have a great article by David Ways.
Right.
And this is from his website, The Longest Way Home.
Yes, he's a guidebook author who actually leads heritage walks in Kathmandu.
Wow.
One of them actually goes from the Thamel tourist hub right to Durbar Square.
Oh, that's great. So this is going to be fun to talk about because, he has that real world experience and,
Yeah.
he's written a lot about it. And
Right.
Kathmandu Durbar Square, like you said, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yeah, and it's not like your typical sort of roped off
Right.
historical site.
Yeah.
This is a place where you can actually see daily life
Yeah.
happening all around you. There are vendors, there's worship, there are people going to work, right, in and amongst these centuries-old temples and palaces.
Right. And this is something that Ways really emphasizes in his article.
Yeah.
He talks about, it being a living, breathing heart of Kathmandu.
Mm,
So it's not just frozen in time, which I think is really cool.
yeah, definitely.
And speaking of David Ways, like you said, he's not just some armchair traveler. He's actually a seasoned guidebook author who leads these heritage walks.
Yeah.
So he knows this area like the back of his hand. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and his heritage walks are really interesting because they're not just about looking at the sites.
Yeah.
He designs them to give you a feel for the evolution of the city.
Oh, I see.
You know, how it's developed over time and the
Right.
layers of history that you see there.
Okay, so I'm picturing myself like walking along and all of a sudden I'm seeing something that's, centuries old and then right next to it is
Right.
something that's, very modern.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, before we get too deep into this, I think we should talk about the 2015 earthquake,
Right.
which obviously had a devastating impact on Kathmandu.
Yeah, a lot of the structures at Durbar Square suffered damage, particularly in the southern part. Yeah.
Sad to hear that, but um, the good news is that there have been amazing rebuilding and restoration efforts.
Yeah, and what's really impressive is that they're not just rebuilding these structures, they're actually restoring them using traditional techniques and craftsmanship.
Wow.
They want to make sure that they're preserving not just the architecture, but also the skills and knowledge that went into creating it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, these structures weren't built with modern materials or technology. So it's
Yeah.
important to use those traditional methods to ensure that they're restored authentically.
Absolutely.
And speaking of preserving, David Ways, he was actually involved in a project with the Digital Archaeology Foundation.
Oh, right.
Digitally document these structures before the earthquake,
Wow.
which is incredible because it means that even if something were to happen in the future, they have these incredibly detailed blueprints
Mm-hmm.
to guide any restoration efforts.
It's like an insurance policy for history.
Yeah, it is.
And it just shows how important it is to blend traditional craftsmanship with modern technology.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the earthquake. We've talked about the restoration efforts.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about what you can actually see when you visit Durbar Square.
Right.
What are some of the must-sees?
Well, one of the first places you have to see is Kathmandu.
Okay.
It's a three-roofed pavilion, one of the oldest structures in the square, that was completely destroyed in the earthquake.
Wow.
But it's been painstakingly rebuilt.
Oh, that's great.
And it's open to the public again. You can see beautiful carvings on the struts of the roof.
And I read that there are some
Yes.
rather risque carvings there as well.
That's right. They're actually images of the god Gorakhnath,
Oh, interesting.
but they are a bit erotic.
Okay. I'll have to keep an eye out for those.
Keep an eye out.
Now, what about the tallest temple in the square? What's the story behind that one?
That would be the Trilokya Mohan Narayan Temple. It's dedicated to Vishnu, and it's quite a sight to behold. The main temple has been fully restored, but there's still some work being done on a nearby Shikara-style temple.
Okay, well, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Now, you can't talk about Durbar Square without mentioning the Kumari,
Right.
the living goddess.
Right.
I'm fascinated by this tradition.
Yeah.
Tell me more about her residence, the Kumari Bahal.
It's a stunning example of Newari architecture.
Oh, wow.
It has incredible woodwork. You have to see it to believe it.
Okay.
But you can only admire it from the outside because the Kumari only makes very limited public appearances.
Oh, I see.
It adds to the mystique, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I know there are tons more temples to discover in Durbar Square, but are there any other that you think are particularly noteworthy?
Well, you can't miss the Talaju Temple.
Okay.
It's one of the most beautiful in the square, but unfortunately it's off limits to visitors.
Ah,
But you can still appreciate its grandeur from afar. Then there's the Shiva Parvati temple, which is undergoing renovations, but it's still worth a look.
Okay, so even if it's under construction, it's still something to check out.
Yeah.
What about the Basantapur Tower? I know that was damaged in the earthquake as well.
Yeah, it was hit pretty hard, but the exterior has been restored.
Okay.
They're still working on the interior, though.
Okay, so it's still standing, though.
Oh, yeah, it's standing tall.
That's good.
Yeah.
And last but not least, we have to mention the imposing white building that dominates the southern side of the square.
The Gadi Bithak.
Yeah.
It's a former royal palace
Well,
that's been fully restored and is open to the public.
that's cool.
Yeah, you can go inside and admire the beautiful architecture and decoration.
Okay, so it seems like every corner of this square holds a piece of history just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
But what about the atmosphere? What's it like to actually be there surrounded by all this history?
Well, imagine strolling through the open square near the Kumari house.
Okay.
You're surrounded by a vibrant mix of sights and sounds. There are vendors selling colorful trinkets, traditional singing bowls, you name it.
Oh, wow.
And then you might encounter the sadhus,
The sadhus.
the holy men, yeah. Okay.
They add a real splash of color to the scene, and they're usually happy to pose for a photo, for a small fee, of course.
Of course, yeah. You got to watch out for that.
Yeah, that's right. But they're really interesting to see.
Okay, now I read in David's article that if you need a break from the crowds, you can duck down Freak Street, which is just south of the square.
Right.
What's the story behind Freak Street?
Well, back in the 60s and 70s, it was part of what was called the hippie trail
Oh, wow.
that went through Asia.
I see.
And so a lot of hippies would come through Kathmandu, and they would stay on Freak Street.
Oh, wow.
It's much quieter now, but it still has a bit of that bohemian vibe.
So it's kind of a little escape from the
Yeah, exactly.
from all the craziness.
It's a nice little respite.
Okay, so we're talking about, all these amazing things to see, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How much does it cost to enter Durbar Square?
Well, as of 2024, the entrance fee is 1,000 rupees,
Okay.
which is pretty reasonable.
And David actually recommends, if you're staying in the area for a while, to get a long stay ticket.
Yeah.
You can get it from the tourist office inside the square, and it's valid for your whole visa duration.
Okay.
So you can come and go as you please.
That's good to know. What about getting to Durbar Square from Thamel? Was it a long journey?
Not at all. It's about a 20-minute walk, but you have to be careful of the traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Kathmandu traffic is pretty notorious, especially the motorbikes.
Oh, yes.
Zipping in and out of those narrow streets.
Okay, so be careful out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, this has been fascinating so far. We've talked about the history, the architecture, the challenges of the earthquake, the restoration,
Yeah.
and the amazing things that you can see.
Yeah, it's an incredible place.
I'm really eager to learn more about David's heritage walks and how they can deepen our understanding of Durbar Square.
Yeah, me too. His approach is really interesting because he doesn't just focus on the physical landmarks.
Right.
He tries to give you a feel for the flow of time and the evolution of the city.
Okay, so it's not just about ticking things off a list.
Right, exactly.
It's about understanding
Yeah.
the bigger picture.
It's about connecting with the soul of Kathmandu, not just its surface.
I like that, connecting with the soul of Kathmandu.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into that right now. Let's talk about these heritage walks.
Okay, sounds good. So his walk from Thamel to Durbar Square,
Right.
it's designed to kind of be like a journey through time.
Okay.
You start in Thamel, which is, this modern tourist hub, and you gradually make your way to this ancient heart of the city.
Oh, wow.
So you really get a feel for how Kathmandu has evolved.
Yeah, I like that. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not just about, checking things off your list. It's
It's
about,
about the experience.
yeah, the experience.
Yeah, and he takes you through all these little hidden alleyways
Ooh.
and bustling markets and quiet courtyards,
Hi.
places that most tourists would never see.
So you're really getting like
Yeah, you're getting a behind-the-scenes look at Kathmandu.
an insider's view.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, we talked about the 2015 earthquake,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
obviously was devastating,
Yeah.
and the amazing efforts to rebuild
Yeah.
these incredibly intricate structures.
Right, right.
What were some of the challenges and the triumphs?
Well, I mean, it was a huge task.
Yeah.
These structures weren't built with modern technology. They were built by hand.
Right.
using techniques that have been passed down for generations.
So they had to
That's what
really
still real.
find people with those skills.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about finding people with the skills.
Right.
It was about finding people who were willing to teach those skills to a new generation.
Oh, yeah, because you want to keep that tradition alive.
Exactly.
So it's not just about rebuilding the structures. It's about
preserving a legacy.
Yeah, preserving a legacy. And that's where David's work with the Digital Archaeology Foundation comes in.
Right.
Because by creating these incredibly detailed 3D models of these structures, they've basically captured a snapshot of their architectural heritage.
Yeah, it's incredible what they've done.
Yeah, so it's like insurance in a way.
Exactly.
You know, if anything were to happen again, they have these blueprints to guide the rebuilding.
Yeah, and not just blueprints. I mean, they're 3D models, so they can,
that's amazing.
virtually rebuild the structure before they even start working on it physically.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've talked about, some of these amazing temples. Are there any other, lesser-known treasures?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean,
Durbar Square.
the main temples are definitely the ones that get all the attention.
Right.
But there are all sorts of smaller shrines and statues and carvings that are just as interesting.
Okay.
And this is where David's expertise really comes in handy.
Right.
Because he knows where to find these hidden gems.
He's like a treasure hunter. He is.
So it's like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, it's like a scavenger hunt through history.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we're talking about all these visual things.
Right.
But
there's more to it than that.
Yeah, what about the other senses?
Yeah, you got to think about the sounds and the smells.
Okay.
I mean, you're in the middle of Kathmandu.
Right.
It's a very lively city.
Yeah.
You might hear chanting from a nearby temple.
Okay.
Or the ringing of bells or people haggling over prices.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and the smells.
What kind of smells?
Well, you got the incense burning.
Right.
And then all the street food.
Oh, the street food, yeah.
Yeah, you can get momos.
Momos, okay.
Those are like these steamed dumplings.
Okay.
Filled with meat or vegetables.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. And if you're feeling adventurous, you could try some chwila.
Chwila.
Yeah, it's a spicy dish made with grilled buffalo meat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a real treat.
Okay. Well, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
I know, me too.
So we've talked about all these amazing things,
Yeah.
the sights, the sounds, the smells. What about the practicalities of navigating a place like Durbar Square?
Well, first of all, you got to be aware of your surroundings.
Okay.
It's a popular tourist destination.
Right.
So unfortunately, there are pickpockets and scammers around.
Of course, yeah.
So just be mindful of your valuables.
Okay.
And if somebody approaches you offering a tour or a service, always agree on a price up front.
Yeah, good advice.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to walk away if it seems too good to be true.
Right. Better safe than sorry.
Exactly.
What about crowds?
Yeah, it can get crowded, especially during peak season.
Okay.
But even then, there are ways to find some peace and quiet.
Oh, okay.
Like explore the courtyards of the smaller temples.
Okay.
They're often much less crowded.
All right, so it's about venturing off the beaten path a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about, kind of the present day Durbar Square. But let's dive a little deeper into the history.
Okay.
What are some of the key events that have shaped this iconic place?
Well, I mean, as we mentioned earlier,
Right.
Durbar Square has been the center of power in Kathmandu for centuries.
Yeah.
It's seen the rise and fall of dynasties,
Right.
the ebb and flow of different cultural influences.
Okay.
One really important event was the unification of Nepal in the 18th century
Okay.
by King Prithvi Narayan Shah.
Okay.
He chose Kathmandu as his capital.
Okay.
And so Durbar Square became like
Oh, wow.
the symbolic heart of this newly unified nation.
I see. So it's not just a collection of temples. It's
a symbol of national unity.
Yeah, it's a symbol of national unity.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. And of course, we can't forget the 2015 earthquake.
Right.
Which, as we've talked about, really devastated the square and the surrounding area.
It must have been a really difficult time
Oh, absolutely.
for the people of Nepal.
Yeah. It was a tragedy, but it also showed how resilient they are.
Oh, wow. So,
Well, they immediately started rebuilding their communities
boy.
and restoring their cultural heritage.
So it shows how much they...
Shows a deep connection.
Yeah, a connection to their...
Fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that connection is really evident in the ongoing restoration efforts
Absolutely.
at Durbar Square.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the temples, we've talked about the historical events, but what about the culture?
Right?
How does Nepali culture come alive in Durbar Square?
Well, Durbar Square is really like a living embodiment of Nepali culture.
Okay.
It's a place where you can see tradition and modernity existing side by side.
I see.
You'll see ancient rituals being performed alongside everyday activities.
So it's a really unique blend.
Yeah, it's a very dynamic place, full of energy.
Can you give me some specific examples of those traditions that you mentioned?
Well, one of the most captivating traditions is the Kumari.
Right, the living goddess.
Yeah, she's believed to be the embodiment of the Hindu goddess Taleju.
Right.
And she resides in the Kumari Bahal, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And it just adds this layer of mystique to the whole square.
It's amazing how a tradition that's so old can still be so relevant in modern-day Kathmandu.
It's fascinating.
What about other forms of cultural expression?
Well, you'll often hear traditional Nepali music being played, especially during festivals. And there are tons of shops selling traditional crafts, like intricately carved wooden masks.
Oh, wow.
And brightly colored textiles.
Okay, so there's really...
It's a feast for the senses.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
What about the overall atmosphere?
Well, it's a really interesting mix of serenity and chaos.
Serenity and chaos.
Yeah, you have the serenity of the temples, you know, that spiritual vibe, that sense of history. But at the same time, you've got the bustling crowds, the honking horns, the shouts of the vendors.
Okay.
It's a city that never sleeps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really unique...
So it's that juxtaposition that really makes it...
Yeah, I think so.
So special.
It's a reminder that life is full of contradictions.
Yeah.
You know, it's a balance of opposing forces. And I think that's something that you really feel in Durbar Square.
Yeah, I like that. So we've talked about a lot today.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear your personal reflections on Durbar Square.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this place that really resonates with you?
Well, for me, it's the sense of continuity.
Continuity.
Yeah, you know, the way that tradition endures, despite the earthquakes, the modernization, the influx of tourism, you can still witness these ancient rituals.
Right.
You can still hear the chanting of mantras. You can still feel that spiritual energy that's been present in this place for centuries.
So it's like this unbroken chain.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really speaks to the importance
Yeah.
of preserving our cultural heritage.
Absolutely.
And it's a reminder that even in a world that's changing so rapidly, there are still places where we can connect with something.
Something timeless.
Yeah, something timeless.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a really beautiful thought.
Yeah, I think so.
And it makes me think about, you know, that universal yearning that we all have for connection, for meaning, for a sense of belonging.
Yeah, and I think Durbar Square really offers that.
It does, yeah.
You know, it's a place with this rich history, this vibrant culture, and this enduring spirit.
Right.
And I think that's something that really resonates with people.
Yeah, it's a place that invites us to slow down, to observe, to listen, to learn.
Yeah, and in doing so, we might just learn something about ourselves.
Right.
In the process.
Well said. I like that. So we've talked about Durbar Square from a lot of different angles. We've talked about the history, the culture, the architecture, the practicalities of visiting.
Right.
But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I want to remind our listeners about David Way's guidebooks.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because they offer a wealth of information.
They do.
For anyone who wants to experience the magic of Durbar Square firsthand.
Yeah, they're a great resource.
So kind of like having David as your personal tour guide.
Yeah, you get all his insights and stories.
That's awesome. So if you're ready to embark on your own adventure, be sure to check out David's guidebooks.
You won't regret it.
All right.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll pause our exploration for now.
Okay.
But stay tuned for the final part of our journey where we'll delve even deeper into the heart of Kathmandu Durbar Square. Welcome back to our exploration of Kathmandu Durbar Square.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we've gone deep into the history and the culture.
Yeah, and the architecture.
Architecture.
And even the practicalities of visiting.
Absolutely.
But for this final part of our journey,
okay,
I want to touch on something that David emphasizes in his writing.
Okay.
And that is the concept of responsible tourism.
Right. That's so important.
It is, especially in a place as culturally and historically rich as Kathmandu.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the ways that David encourages travelers to engage with Durbar Square?
Well, one of the biggest things he stresses is supporting local businesses.
Okay.
So, buy handicrafts from local artisans,
right?
Eat at family-run restaurants.
Right. So it's about putting your money back into the community.
Exactly.
Rather than, the big chains.
Right. And I think it's about shifting your mindset a bit.
Okay.
Instead of just being a passive observer,
right.
You're an active participant in the community.
Yeah, I like that. So you're actually contributing to the well-being of the place that you're visiting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that David really embodies.
How so?
Well, he's not just a guide, Right. He's an advocate for Nepal and its people.
Yeah, you can really see that in his writing.
Oh, yeah. His passion really shines through.
Okay, so before we wrap up,
Sure.
I have to circle back to something that piqued my curiosity.
Okay.
And that's the risque carvings.
Ah, yes.
On some of the temples.
The erotic art of Durbar Square.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something you necessarily expect to see.
Right. It can be a bit surprising.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these carvings weren't just meant to be titillating.
Okay.
They had symbolic meanings.
I see.
Often related to fertility, the cycle of life, that kind of thing.
So it's about understanding the cultural context.
Right, exactly.
Rather than imposing our own modern interpretations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that travel is an opportunity to broaden our perspectives.
For sure.
And to appreciate the diversity of human expression. Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we come to the end of our exploration, I'd like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
All right, I like it.
We've explored the history, the culture, the architecture of Durbar Square.
Right.
But what about its future?
That's a good question.
What challenges and opportunities lie ahead for this iconic place?
I mean, it's a place that's constantly evolving.
Right.
It's trying to find that balance between tradition and modernity. It's dealing with the pressures of tourism and development.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the ongoing need for preservation.
Right. So how will Durbar Square navigate these forces?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But I think it's a question worth thinking about.
Yeah, and I hope our listeners will be inspired
Me too.
to, contribute to the preservation and celebration of this amazing place.
Absolutely.
Maybe through supporting responsible tourism or just by spreading awareness of its cultural significance.
I think that's a great takeaway.
So as we wrap up this episode, I want to remind our listeners about David Way's guidebooks.
Yes, definitely.
You can find them on his website, The Longest Way Home.
Yep. It's a fantastic resource for travelers.
And they'll give you all the information you need to plan your own trip to Kathmandu Durbar Square.
And they're full of insights and tips.
Yes, they are.
That you won't find anywhere else.
So there you have it, a glimpse into the heart of Kathmandu Durbar Square.
An amazing place.
It is. And we hope you've enjoyed this journey with us.
Me too.
We encourage you to continue exploring the wonders of Nepal.
Yes, definitely.
And remember to travel with curiosity, respect, and a sense of adventure.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Happy travels, everyone.